College football season has finally started, and with that, we activate our new college football podcast, and no other person I'd love to have us join us than Josh Newberg himself. I am Preston Jackson. Josh Newberg's on the horn. We're going to talk some USF football as the area is all jacked up and excited as the Bulls start 2-0. Two solid performances against two teams they should have hammered, and they're getting ready to start conference play. And then Florida State comes here at noon, as University just announced, in a few weeks, and we'll battle here with the Bulls. Josh, good afternoon to you.
Preston, good to be here. How you doing?
Good, man. Good. First off, not the best news out of Florida State with a Derwin James injury. I guess if you had to be injured with a knee injury, that was one of the better ones to have, but it's still not good. He'll be out for an extended period of time. You hear anything else?
No, we expected this yesterday. We got confirmation that it was not an ACL. We were hearing that he'd probably be out for 3 to 5 weeks. I think that's probably a good realistic timetable for his return. And it does sound like it's a meniscus injury, which is kind of down the path that we were hearing. Florida State can still win without Derwin James. He is a great player, probably one of the top 5 safeties in the country. So while it is a big loss, I do expect them to fully be able to not replace him, but the defense will move on without him.
All right, so let's talk USF. Big win versus Townsend, 20-56 in favor of the Bulls. They come back and they hammer NIU, 48-17. Just quick initial reactions of what you've seen thus far, attending both games, about the Bulls, Josh.
They're exciting. They're exciting again. I think that's really one of the things that I've noticed. I've been at both home games, and even though maybe the crowd isn't what Taggart and Harlan, the AD, want or expect from USF, there is excitement in the stadium. The student section's been a big turnout. They've done well, and they keep the thing loud and going. But it's really USF's offense behind Quinton Flowers, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and Rodney Adams. And Marlon Mack, who was out the last game, but he will provide a lot of offense the rest of the season. They've really opened it up, and it's been good to see. Haven't seen these type of scores in quite some time, and I know that this isn't the big competition of Florida State or even in the American division, but it's still good to see USF go out and dominate.
Yeah, it is. I'll piggyback on what you said, and I posted this on Twitter not too long ago, that I credit USF for providing an absolutely fantastic game day environment at Ray J as much as possible. I think the student section has been great. I think their in-game entertainment has been fun. They keep you peeled to what's going on every break that's happened on the field. They're, I guess, what would we call him? They're your in-game host or your in-game MC. That gentleman does a great job with the energy in the stadium. So I would definitely credit USF for trying to do what big-time programs do to get their program to be big-time. Winning's going to fill the stadium at some point. We know Florida State game's going to be packed. We didn't expect a big turnout for NIU or Townsend. But as the better teams start to come to town and they start playing their conference games and they keep winning, I think that's definitely going to draw more people to the stadium.
I think it will too, but I think you also have to look at this from a business perspective. And USF at the end of the day is selling a product of entertainment. And let's say you had this company that's been in business for 20 years, and the last couple of years they've just been putting out a crap product,
right?
And the consumers weren't buying it. Well, if this company starts putting out a excellent product, it's still going to take a little bit of lag time for the consumers to trust it and to really buy in. And I think that's what you're seeing at USF. There's no doubt in my mind or yours that this team, the one they're putting on the field in 2016, deserves more fans at the game. They truly do. They deserve more fans. However, USF wants people's money. This is a business. You have to earn that trust. So there's going to be two things that draw more people. It's going to be good games and more wins. So while they might deserve it, and Taggart and Harlan can say whatever they want about being disappointed. You got to remember that this isn't just a one-year situation. This is something with the fan base that they've got to really cultivate and build back.
I love it. I like that honest opinion. I like the standpoint that you brought. Let's go into some football on the field. Quinton Flowers has been fantastic. Over his first 2 games, 29 and 51, 528 yards, with a great QB rating of 178, nearly 179, 6 touchdowns to 1 INT ratio. If Quinton Flowers was in a larger conference, would he be as good, and B, would national media be singing his praises?
No, I don't think he'd be as good in a bigger conference for a couple reasons. One, he lacks size. He lacks ideal size. But two, he's really inconsistent underneath and down the middle. The throws, he's great at throwing the deep ball, and I love what they've done with him. This reminds me, I watched him in 7-on-7 for 2 years, and all he would do is just bomb it on guys all day. Quinton Flowers, 40 yards, 50 yards, just letting it rip. And what USF has done is given him that throwback. Maybe it's part of his development. Maybe it's part of the offense. I don't know. But he has taken these shots, and that's what he was always great at. So Quinton really struggled with his touch. He struggled underneath, even on 7-on-7. I think if you had a all-around QB that was good at all these things, if Quinton was good, really, truly good at all these things, let's be honest, I don't think he'd be at USF anyway. So I think with USF quarterbacks, nobody's ever been perfect. From Marquell Blackwell to Grothy to BJ Daniels to Quinton Flowers, none of these guys are perfect. They're all going to struggle. They all have parts of their game that they struggle with. But what USF fans need to do is just appreciate them for who they are. You and I both know, back even when BJ was running the offense, we look back on it now and think he was one of the best quarterbacks ever at USF. But there was fans every week saying that they should bench BJ because of his completion percentage or because he wasn't doing this or that. And it's like, you've got to understand that with every QB at USF there's going to be deficiencies. And with Quinton, it's the underneath routes, it's the timing routes. Well, guess what? USF is just letting him launch it, and they're kind of playing to his strengths. And that's what they need to keep doing. He's going to make these mistakes, but he's also going to hit long, deep passes like he has in the first 2 games.
How do you think Taggart has managed his personnel so far?
Well, so far so good. The interesting part's going to come when they receive, and knock on wood, but if they do receive an injury or two to the offensive line. They have a very solid unit up front right now, but behind those guys are a whole lot of question marks, a whole lot of inexperience, and a whole lot of youth. I think as long as the offensive line stays healthy, I think USF can do what they want on offense. They can throw the deep ball. They can keep running math. They get an injury or two, you're going to have to start maybe keeping a back in the backfield to chip on 3rd and 5 or whatever. And you're going to have to do a couple of things to slide protection. And I think at that point, it's going to become a real chess match for USF. And they're rather thin at a few positions. So really health is going to determine, I think, how far this team ultimately goes, because on paper, I love what they're putting out there for the starting defense and the starting offense. It's just going to become tricky if they sustain some injuries.
If you had to circle one aspect of the USF offense that you said is probably the strength, let's do that. The strength of the USF offense outside of Quinton Flowers is which position group?
Even though they have Marlon Mack, I'd probably say as a unit, as a pure unit, the wide receiver group is probably the strongest on the team. They just got some bad boys there. They got size. They got speed. They got guys they can plug in to do whatever they want in any situation. There's not a whole lot of guys that can guard Valdez one-on-one or Rodney Adams one-on-one, and that frees other players up underneath. They're mismatches. I really like the wide receiver group a whole lot.
I really like the wide receiver group also. I think Rodney Adams is a different type of ball player. He's so versatile. I jet sweep Rodney Adams. He ended up having 10 carries a game with that jet sweep. Even if you only get 5-6 yards a pop, eventually he's going to bust one for 60. You and
Yeah,
I,
he sure could. And
yeah,
Riche Bronson showed up
yes, he
in this
did.
last game. We haven't heard his name a whole lot,
Yep.
since really his freshman year. So it was good to see that as another threat. And that's kind of what when Valdez and Adams have big games, that's what kind of happens. The defense sees that on film, and they gotta scheme for those guys, and it creates opportunities for other players. And that was good to see Bronson step up.
And right now, Valdez with 8 catches, Bronson with 4, Rodney with 7. Dearness Johnson, he's a running back. He's at 5. And then Tyree McCants with 2. So they're spreading the wealth. Even though it's versus lesser competition, being able to trust several different receivers is still a plus.
Absolutely.
Now,
it gives Flowers the freedom to not lock in on a guy. So many years at USF, we saw maybe 1 or 2 reliable receivers on the field at the time. The defenses knew where the ball was going. The QB knew where the ball was going. It was an easy interception or pass breakup. And now it's like, you got to have your head on a swivel if you're on defense guarding these USF guys, because there's so many receivers that can hurt you.
Right now, we've got. I like the balance, man. I'm a USF homer because I'm a Tampa guy. So I like to see them do well, but I still have to stay objective because of my job and profession. But the balance out of the offense is still pretty good, man. I'm just by the numbers, you're looking at 600 yards passing, 500 yards receiving, rushing, and that's really good balance for 2 games in. I'll tell you one thing that I'm scared of, Josh. What I am scared of, and I've expressed this to some guys in their ear, is that I'm scared that Quinton Flowers will end up becoming too much a part of the running game. Will end up with 10, 11, 12 carries a game. And if Flowers goes down, you've seen the backup more than I have, but if Flowers happens to go down, how much does that change the complexity of the USF offense? Does it make it better or worse?
Well, Flowers going down won't be a good thing. That being said, I spoke to some sources prior to the start of the season. It was actually right around the time they named Brett Keane as the number 2. It was a couple days before that. And I was told by somebody close to the program that they absolutely believe that if Flowers went in and Keane replaced him, that Keane would be in there and he could win them a ball game.
Okay.
Not just get them the snap and hand it to Marlon Mack, but they felt that if Flowers went down, that Keane could win them some ball games. So while he won't be on the same level, and you can just see even the chemistry is there with Flowers and his wide receivers. There's a lot going on. But I do think that Keane could come in. Now, I don't think that USF should take Flowers' legs out from under him, and here's why. Maybe some of the design run.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're throwing the deep ball and it's on, and you got guys running streak routes, and say it's 3rd and 8, it might be wide open for Quinton to take that ball and run it for the first down, because you got DBs streaking all the way up the field to cover these wideouts. Linebackers are dropping into coverage, and the run might be there, and he needs to take that to keep these defenses honest. So I do like the fact that he runs. I think they should continue to keep that in his arsenal. Of course, when you get into games against Florida State, I think you need to be more cautious with them. One, because they got some bad boys on defense. But 2, I don't think you need to go all out with Quinton Flowers to win that game, because it's not a conference game.
Right.
While it would be great to beat FSU, it's much more important to have a healthy Quinton Flowers when you enter the American schedule and you got to play Houston and all these other teams that actually matter. So I think if you use his legs wisely, it's a great thing. But I don't think that you should take his legs out from under him. No.
Well, maybe I could have misspoke. Hopefully, I may not have been clear. The design runs is what I'm concerned about. Him scrambling, you got to do what you got to do. And a guy who can throw the ball and is athletic enough to pick up 40 yards a rush, possibly, you got to let him do it. Don't second guess. If you're an athlete, be an athlete. But when you're a lot of the zone read stuff, a lot of the quarterback traps and QB design runs is where I get a concern at.
I think you got to pick your spot,
right,
your tagger, on where you're going to run them.
You're dang right. Now, all the positive out the window. Any concerns right now for the South Florida Bulls? Where are you concerned? Is there a position concern? Is there a play calling concern? Do you have any concerns right now?
I'm not too concerned. Like I said earlier about the depth at offensive line, but knock on wood, right now we're good there. We don't need to worry about that. I want to see some of these matchups in the secondary. You know, USF's has a good secondary, but they're on the small side, especially when you get into games like FSU and Syracuse. Mm-hmm. So I think this game against Syracuse, we're going to learn a lot about this USF football team. Win or lose, we're going to learn a lot about them.
Right.
And some of these matchups that we've seen early on against Towson and NIU, it is clear as day that USF is overmatching teams physically and speed-wise. Mm-hmm. When they meet up with Syracuse isn't FSU, but they are on a higher level than Towson and NIU. When they match up with Syracuse, we're going to see a bigger squad than USF has faced all season.
Now, I said the same thing,
Josh. Are they faster? That's questionable.
Josh,
but I just think we're going to learn something this weekend.
I said the same thing to one of my guys on staff. I said, when those teams have walked out that locker room, it was a clear-cut difference, the size and athletic ability between USF and Townsend and NIU. And he was joking.
I thought NIU was going to be a little bit more even match when it came to size and speed, and they were not.
Not at all.
And that's credit to USF's recruiting.
Not at all. I'll tell you my two concerns. My first concern, which is split down the middle 50-50, is the defensive line. I think the defensive line is outstanding versus the run. I think they're built to stop the run. I think they're strong up front. I think they're really active, especially big number 10, Derwin James. I like him a bunch.
Derwin James,
yes. Yes, he's a man child.
And he was a guy that was recruited by a lot bigger schools than USF. At one point, he was on the verge of committing to FSU. They did offer him. He went up there in camp. They loved him. They would have taken him. He waited it out and ultimately committed to USF. So he is a guy that could have been playing elsewhere on Saturdays, but chose to stay close to home and play for USF.
That's credit to the Bulls. Vincent Jackson's done some pretty good things. Mike Love's done some pretty good things. Josh Black, a lot of these local guys who are playing on the defensive line. The Bulls' defensive line looks really good when you stand up against them, and then they look really good against the run. But I do have a concern about them against the pass. I have not seen the speed rush off the end. I haven't seen anybody who's an active pass rusher. I don't know if they have that guy who's going to be able to up and under, come off the edge, stand up, do different things with. We just have not seen it versus 2 games. And in these 2 games, you got 5 sacks total, 3 versus Townsend and 2 versus NIU. And both of those teams passed the ball over 25, 30 times. So,
good point.
And with USF as dominant as they have been, you would like to see the hurries and that sack number elevated some. My second number, and I want you to combat me after I give you my second concern. My second concern is USF, not so much the secondary in a whole, but them not playing much man-to-man at all. All right? And I say this because if you're lacking a pass rush out of the front 4, which means you're going to have to bring 5 to 6, you're going to have to be able to man up on the back end. USF hasn't played man-to-man. Now, that could be by their opponent. That could be by design. Or that could be they don't have a lot of confidence in their secondary to play man-to-man. But if it becomes a problem where they can't get a pass rush with the front 4, which means they got to bring at least 5 to 6, they're going to have to man up. And if they're not very good doing it, they're going to get exposed when they get deep into conference play.
And I agree that could be a problem down the road for them because, like what I was saying earlier, was the size in the secondary. And if you're going man-to-man against Houston's wide receivers, they got Power 5 type wide receivers and speed and size out there. So maybe that's also why, because their personnel and their doesn't measure up to what the wide receivers are, so they're playing more zone. But, that's going to be something to watch. And I think we're going to, like I said, we're going to learn more next week against Syracuse.
All right, last question. We had a Twitter question. The question was, what is USF's ceiling? So fans want to know right now, with a limited sample, Josh Newberg, what do you see USF ceiling being this season?
I think at the end of the season, being in serious competition for the conference championship. But ultimately, I don't see them winning it this year. I think Houston still got is the team to beat.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they're going to be competitive against a team like Houston. And if you told me right now, if you looked in your crystal ball and you told me that USF beat Houston, I wouldn't be shocked. But I also don't expect it to happen. Not this year, at least. You got to remember, you got Quinton Flowers returning next year. You got a couple running backs that have been promising, even if Mac leaves. I think they're going to have a good team next year, and that'll probably be more realistic to set the ceiling as a conference championship, or even saying that we expect them to win a conference championship next year. I couldn't say that this year.
On our side, on the east side of the American Conference, Cincinnati's at 2-0, East Carolina's at 2-0, USF 2-0. None have played a conference game just yet. But the schedule is, I wouldn't say favorable to USF, because they will go to Syracuse, they come back with Florida State, and then they go right into at Cincinnati versus East Carolina, and then versus UConn, and then at Temple, right in the heart of their conference schedule. So it's about to get tough for USF. I think we're going to find out what we have here in about, I'd give them 3 weeks, Josh. If they can come out 2-3 over the next 3 games, I think we'll know what kind of football team we have here that plays in Ray J.
Yeah, I agree. And for USF fans, I think it's smart to not get too caught up into the result of the next 2 weeks. Because even if USF loses Syracuse and FSU, they could still go on and complete nearly every goal they have this season. And if they won the conference, then it is arguably the best season in USF history, even if they don't beat Syracuse and Florida State. Now, those games are good for USF fans. I would use those as measuring stick games, meaning you kind of get a gauge of where you stand as a program nationally, or take away all the conference labels, and you can kind of see where you stand because you're playing a mid to bottom tier ACC team and then one of the top 3 teams in the country. So you kind of get a feeling of where USF stands nationally before they head into conference play.
That is Josh Newberg. I'm Preston Jackson. We'll be back here often, as I'm going to try and wrap Josh in as much as possible to be a part of our podcast to talk about the Bulls, so we can use his depth of knowledge. Josh, we appreciate you.
All right, Preston. Thanks for having me on.
All right, buddy. Again, let me just reiterate the Bulls' schedule. They're at Syracuse. That's a 3:30 kickoff. Florida State, just announced here, will be home versus Florida State, and that will be at noon. Then they travel to Cincinnati, home versus East Carolina, home versus UConn, at Temple, home versus Navy. Then they'll go to Memphis, to SMU. They'll finish here at home versus rivals UCF. So we'll know what kind of football team we have. Good luck to all the USF fans. Good luck to the team. We're out.